The US and Europe are suffering through horrible, unprecedented heat waves right now. Multiple places are around the world are enduring 50 plus Celsius on a daily basis. That's over 122 degrees Fahrenheit. That is sweltering, deadly heat. And in the US, we've had four events in the past couple of weeks that are 1 in 1,000 year events. Well, why is all this happening? It's happening because the earth is heating up. And the earth is heating up because we have dumped so many greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. That's CO2, that's methane, that's what they call the F gases, nitric oxide. It's incredible what we've done in the past 250 years to increase the thermal content of our atmosphere. It's sort of like we've added 100 blankets onto your bed at night in the summertime. It just keeps getting hotter. So this is a huge problem for humanity, not because we can't endure a couple of hard days, but because the planet can't endure the continuing heating that we're increasing over the planet. So we have to make some decisions really soon about what we're going to do about it. Now, let's step back for a second. Most people aren't aware of the difference between weather and climate. Weather is what's happening today. So wherever you are today watching this video, it might be, let's say Fahrenheit, it might be 50 out, it might be 70 out, it might be 100 out. That's your weather today. And then tomorrow you have different weather. And again, every single day you have different weather. That's what's happening now in the present time. Climate is what's happening over time. So if you accumulate all the days in, say, 1980, and you measure the high temperature and the low temperature, that gives you what the climate was for that day and for that year, rather. And so what happens is people have a difficulty distinguishing between climate and weather. So if it's really cool where you are today and someone says, well, 120 million Americans are suffering from horrible heat and humidity right now, you're like, well, it's kind of cool here in Denver. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, what do you mean? Or sometimes you'll see people say, well, I mean, what's this global warming thing? It snowed here today. It wasn't supposed to snow. So that's a misunderstanding between weather, which is what's happening today where you are, and climate, which is what's happening over the entire planet all around 365 days a year. So those are the two differences. Now, the other thing is that sometimes we're not aware of what the differences are. So there's nobody here alive today that can watch this video that was around 150 years ago or 250 years ago or for the last 10,000 years. So, but most of humanity and what we have for agriculture, civilization, and everything else has grown up and evolved and matured and developed systems for food, shelter, and everything else based upon what's called the Holocene, or a very stable climate for the past 10,000 years. The difficulty is we're now leaving that safe zone and we're moving into a much hotter zone. We don't know how hot it's going to get. We just know it's getting a lot hotter. Well, why is that a problem? Because our food, how we do agriculture, how we do food, where we plant food, the fact that it has to be irrigated and has to be fertilized and all of that, and then our food systems for transporting food, for storing food, for how we manufacture and combine foods together and then get them to the grocery store, all those things depend upon a certain range of temperature called climate. What's also very important is all our infrastructure, your houses, your water pipes, your sewer systems, your roads and bridges. All these things also depend upon certain and are built for certain temperature ranges. When it gets too hot, things expand. So roads can buckle, railroads can buckle, airport runways can buckle. In fact, if it gets too hot, airplanes can't take off. So there's been a number of times in the past couple of years where it's gotten so hot, for example, in Phoenix or other places around the world, where there's not dense enough air because hotter air is thinner, if you will, than cool, dense air. So it's too thin air and too hot for the heavy plane to take off at the end of the runway. So they have to wait until it cools down. So this is a problem. And there's a whole bunch of problems, but we're not all aware of them because we don't know what they are yet, at least not the general public. Now, scientists can tell us, but there's really three kinds of people who look and assess climate. There's the researchers. Maybe it's someone at a research station in Antarctica or up on Mauna Loa or some other place. They're just measuring day to day what the different numbers are from the readings of all the different instruments and machines that they have. Then there's the people who make reports out of those and kind of assess those reports and publish papers based upon data gathered around from these different, say, locations around the world. And then the third kind of person who's researching in climate is the person who reads a whole bunch of papers and begins to take all the information and build a pattern together. So if we just read one reading, like, oh, it was 50 degrees Celsius today in one place, but it was 20 degrees Celsius in someplace else, that doesn't give us a whole lot of information. If it's 55 Celsius someplace, that's like a huge record. And so we want to pay attention to that. Some of these papers are really shocking because they produce incredible information that we didn't know before, because someone's been able to gather through instrumentation all around the world enough information to produce a bigger picture of something. But the most shocking for most people are going to be the big reports that accumulate data from multiple papers, multiple sources, blend them all together so you get sort of like a 360-degree picture of something. It's like in 3D instead of 2D. And those are the ones that are really making waves, if you will, in the public's mind and also across the scientific community. And there's a lot of difficulty in assessing this, in part because we don't want to. That's the biggest issue, is we don't want this to be true. Nobody wants to say you've probably already lived some of the coolest summers you ever have. And if you're, let's say, 40, that when you were 20 and younger, all of those summers will likely be cooler than summers when you're 45 and older, because the whole trend is hotter and hotter and hotter. Now, there'll be some differences, right? Because there's anomalies and there's variation in climate, but the trend is hotter and hotter and hotter. Now, we go through, typically humans go through 5 stages of grieving, right? So denial, it can't be true. I don't believe it. Anger, oh, it's just a bunch of people doing this for money. Bargaining, well, we could probably build big giant screens in the sky to block the sun. And then depression, like, crap, this is horrible. I really don't want to know this stuff. And then finally, acceptance, which is like, oh, okay, it is true. The world is warming. It is getting hotter, right? Now, I've added a couple of different layers to that, which is to say, instead of the 5 stages of grieving, I think there's actually 8 stages. The first stage is unawareness. If you don't know it's happening, you're completely unaware about it. The second stage is that you get aware of it. You hear a report, you read a paper, you see something on the news, a friend talks to you about climate or something like that, and you're like, now you're aware about it. And then when your mind begins to assess it, maybe like most people, you go immediately into denial if you start hearing some of the worst things that could happen. And then you go through those other stages: denial, anger, right? Bargaining, depression, acceptance. And then finally, the next step at the end of that is acceptance. Well, what the heck can we do? And that's really the most important questions. What the heck can we do? Two of the most important questions about climate are, where are we now and where are we going? And then the third one, of course, is, well, what can we do about it? Well, where we are now is that we have generally warmed about 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial, which is generally 1750 to 1800, somewhere in there. In other words, we've warmed a significant amount. There hasn't, over the past millions of years, been a whole lot of variation in the temperature, which has been good for humans, especially in the last 10,000 years, which I've mentioned. It's been within this nice, safe, cozy zone, sort of the Goldilocks zone. Remember, this porridge is too hot, this porridge is too cold, this porridge is just right, from the Goldilocks mythology, right? So we've lived in this wonderful, safe zone, but now we exited that. We're no longer in the Goldilocks zone. We're in unknown territory. And part of what happens, it's sort of like a state change. So you go from ice to water, right? That's a state change. So when ice melts, you go to water. And what happens is that when you have a state change, you really don't know what it looks like afterwards if you've never been there. So if you've lived only with ice and you've never seen water, or if you lived only with water and never seen ice, when that changes, it's really mind-boggling because you don't know what happens next. And we don't know what happens next. We know that we're right now at about 1.5 Celsius above pre-industrial. We know that we're probably, according to most scientists who are on the cutting edge of the research and the data, we're probably baked in plus 2.4 Celsius. That's already baked in. What do I mean baked in? So there's something called a thermal heat lag, and there's something called momentum. If you're driving down the highway at, let's say, 75 miles an hour, and suddenly a deer steps out a couple of 100 yards ahead of you, there's a lag time between when you see the deer, you get your foot onto the brake pedal, and then you can brake the car to a stop before you hit the deer. There's a lag time. And that lag time at 75 miles an hour, I think, is something like 100 yards. It's incredible before you can actually begin to brake significantly. So we're in that kind of a space right now. Even if we stop creating more CO2, more methane, more pollution of those kinds, stop burning fossil fuels, it's going to take us a lag time to slow down the heating. Now, will it stop? And unfortunately, the answer is probably not. The reason is because Once you set something in motion, it has secondary effects. Now, that's a complex idea, but let me explain it this way. It's like dominoes. If I push a couple of dominoes over and they're all lined up in a giant line, you know what happens. You've seen the video before. You hit one domino, it hits another and another and another and another. And what's more important is that small dominoes can tip over bigger dominoes and bigger ones still. What do I mean by that? Little differences, just at 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.4 degrees Celsius, which we've baked in and guaranteed already, that can have other effects that knocks into each other and triggers other things happening. So what happens when these things trigger other things? It's like if you take a giant ice cube, 10 yards on a side, it's a massive ice cube, and you put it outside in a giant parking lot at, say, a Target or a Walmart or something, grocery store, and you leave it out there at 33 degrees, it will melt. It can't not melt. It may take a long time. It'll melt slower than at 90 degrees, but at 33 degrees, that ice cube, that giant, massive ice cube, will melt. You can't stop it. And so what's happened is above 1.5 Celsius, we've started in action the melting of permafrost. We've started in action the melting of the Arctic sea ice. We've started melting glaciers. And they're just going to keep melting because we've now gone above a certain temperature and we're not going back. So what that means is those things will have other effects. So for example, when you melt the Arctic sea ice, it leaves, instead of a white reflective surface, right? Like when you're skiing or you're snowboarding, you've got to have goggles on that have a tint on them so you don't burn your eyes from the sun reflecting off the snow. Well, in the Arctic, it's the same thing. When that wonderful Arctic white ice covers the water, it reflects sunlight back up. But when it's melted and gone, you have this deep blue ocean. It absorbs that sunlight. And then what does it do? It heats up. So what happens is that accelerates, right? That's called a feedback loop. It accelerates the heating of the water and the melting of the ice. So the more ice melts, the more the water heats, which means the more ice melts, which means the more the water heats. So we've set in motion these tipping points and these feedback loops that are going to keep warming the earth. Well, where does it stop? We don't know. What we do know is that there are multiple long-term consequences from continued heating. The problem isn't that we don't know what they mean, it's that we don't know how hot it's going to get. Will it get to 3, 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius? There's a lot of problems with what we don't know. And there's something called the precautionary principle, which says, let's take our example of driving on the highway again at 75 miles an hour at night. If the lights suddenly go out on your car, you want to stop as soon as possible. Not because you won't be able to see by the stars, there won't be enough ambient light for you to drive in the dark. It's just that it's wildly dangerous. And so the precautionary principle says you should stop immediately and pull the car over because it's too dangerous to keep going. Another example, if you got on an airplane, let's say you were flying on British Airways or Air France or American Airlines, and there was a 1 in 10 chance the plane would crash, would you get on? No, because you would never get on an airplane if there was a 10% chance of crashing on every flight because it'd just be too dangerous, right? The precautionary principle would say, hell no, I'm not getting on the airplane, right? How about 1 in 100? Would you get on? Probably not. 1 in 1,000. Some people would, but I wouldn't. 1 in 10,000. Maybe I would get on, sure. But if you start talking about the fact that right now we have a 1 in 5 chance of hitting +4 Celsius by the end of this century, that should scare us. And the precautionary principle should tell us we need to radically stop heating with all human effort that we can, because +4 means agriculture is gone. +4 means half the world will be in drought and turn into desert. +4 means the end of organized human civilization, because it's that much. Now you say, well, it's only 4 degrees Celsius. Well, imagine a child, let's say a 5-year-old, gets a fever. They have 101 Fahrenheit fever. That's not good. 102, that's not good. 104, that's getting dangerous. 106, and the child can die. Well, that's only a few degrees. That's right. So the Earth system is actually more sensitive than the human body. We have a stronger tolerance than the Earth itself. If you get that 4 degrees Celsius, half the world becomes uninhabitable for a portion of the year. And nobody's going to move out of sub-Saharan Africa and then move back when it gets cooler every year. It's not going to happen. So you're going to have billions of people migrating. You're going to have massive conflicts and massive political upheaval. That's just what all the computer models tell us, all the experts tell us, all the insurance companies tell us this is what would happen. The military tells us this would happen. Well, why aren't we talking about it? Because our way of life depends upon not talking about it. Our fossil fuel use, our consumption, all these things require us to not talk about it. Now, why am I talking about it? I'm talking about it because it's important. This is your life. I mean, if you're 85 years old, you're probably not going to experience too much of it. If you're 35 years old or 45 or even 55, you're going to experience a hell of a lot of it. Because right now we're on track to hit plus 2.4, that baked in plus 0.24 Celsius. We're on track to experience that within the next 20 years. And then plus 3.5, where most of agriculture begins to collapse significantly, within the next 35 to 40 years. That's shocking, but it's what we're on track for. In fact, what I would say to you is you've heard about maybe IPCC and COP, all these big giant climate conferences we've been having for over 25, 30 years, actually 35 years now. They have all these conferences. And what they've all said is we can't go past 1.5. 1.5 really causes destruction. Well, we're already past it. And we can't go past 2.4 because we start losing a lot of agriculture, water systems, political disruption. Well, guess what? That's already baked in. And what all those conferences said is we are in a range of possibilities. Well, I should do it this way. On the low end, 1.5, we can probably maintain human civilization, most of capitalism and democracy and those things. But if you get up here to the top end of the worst case scenarios, everything we know of begins to collapse. We are currently tracking right now the worst case scenario. That worst case scenario up here, we are currently tracking that globally on every single measure. So that's why I'm talking about it. Because even if right now you've been unaware of it, now you're a little aware of it. And even if you go into denial, say this can't possibly be true, let me tell you, I've been studying climate. Actually, I was studying atmospheric gases in 1980 and what it was doing for climate back then. So I've been studying this for a long time on the side, have a degree in it and everything else, and I've worked on numerous programs and worked with a lot of scientists. This is happening. This is real. So it's okay to be in denial now, be in anger, think about, well, what can we do? All those other stages. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to move into a shift in your thinking because either you'll shift your thinking or the reality of what happens down the line is going to shift your thinking. And it's better to be prepared than it is to just go into it blindly. So you're probably asking yourself, what can I do? I'm just one guy, one gal, one man, one woman, one person, one human. What can I do? Well, a lot. First, you've got to become aware. The more knowledge and information you have, the better your decision making, right? The better your conversation. What we have to do is spread the word amongst each other and talk about hard things. It's easier to talk about someone else's hard thing than our own. For example, when my grandmother got sick, the family all talked about it. How can we help her? What can we do? Right? When her brother got cancer, we talked about it. When my dad got cancer, our family talked about it. What can we do? What's the right thing? Talk to the doctors, listen to the experts, those kinds of things. And so what you can do is you can begin to learn more, understand the reality of what's happening, and begin to talk about it. Because unless talking about this becomes more important than a soccer star, a soccer cup match, or these things, until this becomes the most important thing we're talking about, we're probably not going to do enough about it to avert the worst. Now, in that driving the car 75 miles an hour down the highway and the deer appears, we know what to do instinctively. We brake. And what we have to do instinctively, all of us, is make it automatic in our thinking, our understanding, our awareness, and our actions to begin to brake. You got to know what to do. You got to understand the situation, and you have to make better choices. We do. I do. All of us do. And by doing so, we can force our governments and the corporations and the people with power to talk about it and to do something about it. After 9/11 in New York, there was a saying, if you see something, say something, right? If you see something that looks wrong, say something to someone who can do something about it. And that's what we have to do now. If you know something, right? If you know something, we have to do something. We have to talk about it and we have to take action. So I would say, educate yourself, learn more about it, become fluent in what it means and how it works and everything else and what the consequences are and what we can do to lessen the blow. And that will all help us collectively, right? Because it takes one grain of sand to start an avalanche. It takes, one snowflake to start a giant avalanche on a mountain. And we have to be that grain of sand, each of us together, to go out and to learn, and then to say, what can we do? And to force the experts to speak the truth about what's going on, so the political people and the corporate people will take action. Because I'll tell you what, the top political people, the top military people, the top corporate people, they already know all of this is true, but they're not telling you because they're afraid to tell you. So let's make them talk. Let's make them talk about it. Let's us talk about it. Let's us take action. Part of bargaining in that stage of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, on those five traditional pieces, part of bargaining is to seek reasoning about why this is happening. There's going to be people who say, oh, this must mean the rapture's coming. There's going to be people who say, oh, this is the industrialists and the elites trying to cause collapse of the world so they can have everything for themselves and live in their space colonies. There's all kinds of reasons that people will come up with to explain it away, or to justify not doing something, or to say, those are the bad guys over there, or this is just what's supposed to happen. We deserve it. There's all sorts of reasons that people will come up with. But this is really just simple science. If you turn the thermometer or the thermostat in your house up in the summer and you turn the heat up, it's going to get really hot inside your house. It's just physics and math. And if you do the wrong thing long enough, it's going to have consequences, right? If I sat and ate McDonald's cheeseburgers 5 times a day, and I ate nothing else but cheeseburgers and fries and Coca-Cola, not that you can't have those once in a while, but as a diet, I think it's been shown that if you had that every day, all day, you'd probably gain a lot of weight, and your cardiovascular and your health profile would decline. And eventually you get sicker faster than you would have, and you would die of some diabetes or heart disease or something like that if you ate that food every day, all day. And we've been doing that with fossil fuels. We've been eating, right? We've been using fossil fuels every day, all day for a couple of 100 years. And so this is just the natural physics and math consequences of adding just hundreds and thousands of gigatons of CO2 and methane to the atmosphere. If you put enough blankets on a bed, you're going to get hot. And it's not the rapture. It's not someone else's fault. It's not the elites trying to smother you in the bed with too many blankets. It's just physics and math. And the good news is that means that we can do something about it. It means we can use our intellect, our wisdom, our insight, our ideas, our best practices. We can change our behaviors. We don't have to eat the cheeseburgers every day, all day anymore. We can do different things, and we can bend the arc of possibility to the best we can to slow the car down, if you will, with another metaphor, to slow the car down before we hit the wall or the deer or something terrible like that. So we have incredible amounts of agency, incredible amounts of power. We have to just use our focus and energy and time and talent and treasure to bend the curve with everything we've got before we hit the wall or the deer. So that's what I would say. So I think one of the great challenges here, and it's in a sense, there's some potential for excitement here, which is that this is the greatest time to be alive in human history, right? With all the resources, knowledge, wisdom, and insight that we've accumulated over centuries and millennia, and everything we can know, and all the expertise we can access online, and working with each other. This is literally the greatest challenge that humanity's ever had. Now, if you think of the past 25 years, there's been a lot of Marvel and other kind of sci-fi movies where the aliens come from outer space and attack the Earth, right? And what do? We all rally together. And it helps us find our one humanity, which is why I'm wearing the shirt today that says global citizen, right? Because it's like we are all in this together. Nobody's going to escape the consequences of radical global heating and ecological collapse. So instead, what we have to do is rally together as if there's some giant alien space species that's attacking us, and treat global warming and ecological collapse as if it is something that must be addressed. We have to come together to fight it and change everything that we need to change to bend the curve, if you will. I think this is simply the most exciting time to be alive. And this is the biggest challenge humanity has ever had and may ever have, as far as we can conceive. So I think this is an incredible time to be alive. Yes, we can all sit and say, woe is me, and we can all, go sit in the corner and cry. And maybe we need to do that once in a while, but fundamentally, this is an incredible time to be alive. This is our unique moment in history where we get to grow up as a species and take care of our home planet so that we have a place to live and everything, and all the web of life on Earth, which we depend entirely on, by the way, right? The bees die, food dies, so we got to keep the bees alive. Oh, and all the other insects and animals. The web of life is what keeps us alive. This is the most incredible, powerful time to be alive. And you, watching this video, have incredible agency, power, and dominion over your life to go help make the changes happen. Why did I bring all this up? Because it's simply the most important thing in the world, right? I mean, there is nothing more important than the giant alien species attacking us, which is called climate and ecological collapse. And you have this power. However, we have to change our thinking. We have to change our mind. You've changed your mind 1,000 times since you were 2 years old. And now it's just another time to change your mind, to learn new information, to change, to grow, to adapt, and to become stronger, smarter, and wiser, which is what the whole point of this channel is about. And so if you like that idea, there's a little bit of a thing down below that can help you, a little ebook that we've created for you. And it's called Change Your Mind, Change Your Life. And I think that all of us need to change our minds a little bit about what's happening with climate and ecological collapse. And in doing so, we'll change our behavior. And in doing so, you're going to be happier, smarter, wiser, and better off, because it's better to surf the wave of change than to be swallowed up underneath it in a tsunami.